Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day we're gonna start to crack it open slowly but surely. And we're gonna use the F word today. Yeah, we're gonna talk about fall. But look, here's the deal. If instead of coming down below and crying about how you just started your summer garden, you're already talking about fall, good grief, just skip this video if you're not interested. But this is about when to start fall, when to start getting ready for it, start seeds, what have you. And this is just part of my mission to get people to really have true multi-season gardens. And what I refer to that is not having a pepper plant go into the fall season, but have an actual cool season crop planted into fall. If you're one of those people that are on the fence about listening to this kind of behavior, let me just go on the record and say it is crazy. I recognize that. We're just about to start getting our tomatoes, our corn's coming up, our sweet potatoes are just coming in. Everything's starting to really get going. But the thing about gardening is we always need to be about 3 steps ahead, I'd say. And it's just part of it. Now I realize that not everybody's goals are the same, and I respect that. But my goal is to bring as much produce into my house out of the space that I have allotted for my family. And with that being said, this is how I go about doing it, and I want to pass this on to you. So what you're going to get out of this, and we'll probably, as we get closer and closer and closer, we'll start talking about it more and more. But you're going to get a mixture of like what I know and what I'm going to be doing and trying different, because this is all just trying to figure it out and getting it down pat. And you're going to have to specify it to your own area. Now that being said, I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I do offer custom seed starting schedules for your area. If you're interested, email me, and for a fee, we can get you that. Because seed starting season, unfortunately, is coming back up. So at this point, when this video comes out, now is not the time to start ripping everything out of your garden, okay? I mean, go about your business, but start making your plans. Okay, this isn't just about planning, but we are going to be taking steps moving into that direction going forward. So, we're going to be emptying out this bed soon. These carrots should be about ready, except for this big giant weed that's decided to show itself. There we go. So this bed will be emptying out soon. These squashes are fulfilling their job. They are ending as we see. We do have squash vine borers within them, which is totally normal and expected. Look, our first okra. Look at that. Isn't that something? I wish I had something to cut it with on me. Ugh. First okra, not bad. So, we are definitely seeing the damage, but we expected this, and we welcome this, especially for this time of year as we get ready to start getting ready for fall. This would be, I don't watch sports or anything like that. I actually hate football and basketball and all that stuff, but this would be like your pre-game show. You know what I mean? This would be when everybody's sitting there flapping their gaiters about it, like 5 hours before the game. They got to discuss everything. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We want to be continuing to fertilize our gardens. And what that's doing is it's not only going to help our gardens as they grow now, but what it's also going to do is it's going to keep everything moving in the right direction and start building up a nutrient bank within our garden. If we take this beautiful bed of corn behind me, we know that corn's a heavy nitrogen feeder. Now what we also know is come about roughly August into September, we're going to be planting crops for fall, and this corn right here is a high nitrogen feeder, and what we know about fall crops is they are also high nitrogen feeders. So we want to keep putting that nitrogen in, because what we also know about nitrogen is it's water soluble, meaning it can easily flush out of your garden. So we have a high feeding crop mixed with another crop, more than likely coming in, and you can get around this a little bit, but we know that we need to start putting nitrogen in and start building that soil up for that. So the way that we tentatively plan to get around it is we're gonna try and put like a root crop in here, probably a radish or a turnip or something like that, that won't be as high of a nitrogen feeder. So we can get around that, but we're still gonna be building up that nitrogen very slowly, just in case that doesn't happen. Just in case we don't have that opportunity and we have to put a cabbage in here or lettuce or something like that. And I do want to just take a moment and say, if I look right down the middle of this, I really do like the spacing this year. I think this is, so far, it's a winner chicken dinner. Yeah, we're just taking these steps. Another thing that we'll do is we'll come out and we will mulch all of our beds. Within the next couple weeks, all the beds will get a layer of mulch on them. So that will protect them, that will keep them moist, because also the drying out in the summertime can be really tough on your garden beds. So we want to keep that moisture in there to keep that organic fertilizer that we put in breaking down consistently and not have little pockets where it's kind of built up and it's not broken down or anything like that. We want to kind of stay on top of it. And so we're going to use that to our advantage and just slowly work our way to it. Now, here's the part that people are going to be upset about when we start talking about starting seeds. For instance, we know in this garden, we are going to probably put another bed of squash in, not two, but just one. We know we're going to put fall tomatoes here. We know that this pepper squash bed over here is not really going to stay for long. We know we're going to get a harvest off of it, and then we're probably going to pull it and then get that ready. And we also know coming over here that both of these tomato beds will not make it past the month of August. So we know all of that. And we also know that these sweet potato beds here and here are both planned to be emptied out sometime around August into September. So we know all of that. And we also know that this, which is now a buckwheat bed, will be harvested, cut, not harvested, and then put back into Brussels sprouts. So we know all of that. We know when our beds are going to open up. Now we need to figure out when to start seeds. So let's talk about starting seeds. So roughly, very roughly, and it depends, every crop is going to be different, okay? Not all seeds get started inside, and not all seeds get direct sowed. So you've got to figure out, what are you going to direct sow and what are you going to start from seed. But typically speaking, if you start a seed in your house and you are going to plant it outside, typically speaking, you need about 8 weeks to get those seeds up and going, get them some fertilizer in them, get them really strong, and then you can start hardening them off. So a lot of people think that there's this misconception that when we start our fall gardens, we got to get it in by the last frost, or the first frost, excuse me. But that's not really true. We got to get it in well before the first frost and be getting ready to harvest just after, maybe a month after our first frost. What does that plant out date look like? Well, let's talk about that plant out date. So for me, in coastal North Carolina, zone doesn't matter, so don't worry about it. My first frost is roughly November 14th, roughly. And really it could go anywhere from the 10th all the way, and I mean, this isn't on the books, but based on my experience, all the way through almost Christmas. But we always count on November 14th. And then even then, usually right around Thanksgiving, we'll get a frost and then it'll warm back up. So we know that, we've done this time and time again. You know, history does not lie. So we know that if we want to get it and we want to harvest it right around then, we got a few things we've got to work out. So typically speaking, I want all of my long season crops. So that would be your broccoli, your cabbage, your Brussels sprouts. If you feel brave, carrots. For my garden, that really does do about the long season crops. And I do grow a lot of those. We want to get those in the ground, and this is where it gets tough, around mid-August. So around mid-August we do that. So 8 weeks before that, 2 weeks into June, that means next week I got to start my seeds. So we're working our way towards that, and we're moving into that direction. So why is that hard? Well, it's hard because it's hot as hell. I mean, right now it's 10 o'clock in the morning and it's 85 degrees and it's 80, I think it was 87% humidity. So, you know, it's pretty damn hot, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. This year I've opted, and I've thought about taking these down, but we're gonna leave them up and use these for some shade this year. So I don't really use shade in the summertime until it's time to plant my fall garden. And then that will really give them time to get going and get settled and really help with the heat to some extent. We'll also use watering as a help to cool the roots down as needed, but hopefully we'll get some rain. We went all winter without rain, and I read a long time ago, climate change is the biggest thing with climate change isn't necessarily heat, it's extremes. So it's like all drought or all rain, all heat or all cold. And that's exactly what's going on. It was dry all winter, and now the last part of spring, I mean, we're just getting a lot of rain, which I'm not gonna complain about. I'll take it, but we need to keep that into account. We hope that to some extent that will keep going in the fall, because that'll help keep the temperatures down a bit too and keep everything growing a little bit better. So the goal is just to keep fertilizing and harvesting. I mean, look at this. Look at that. Beautiful. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Nothing better. Look at that. The rain's knocked it down, but it's loaded with peppers. So, you know, we're just gonna keep that going, keep that nutrition going into the bed, get everything ready. And really, depending on your first frost date. So if your first frost date's in October, you kind of need to be starting seeds now. Now there's one more obstacle, and that's this big old ball of fire right here. That's the problem. So the problem is, and especially in my yard, it's magnified. It gets lower and lower and lower, which means it's not rising as high up above the trees, and there's not as much sunlight. So typically speaking, what we want to do is you want to take a crop, and let's just pick cabbage for right now. You know, it's roughly a 85-day crop. So 85 days from seed to harvest, which I don't think is true. I think it's 85 days from the 8 weeks after I put it in. So 85 days is typically what I get. You want to add another week or two on top of that. But the benefit with all of this is these cool season crops that we're going to be growing shortly, they don't bat an eye at 28 degrees. You know, as long as you get that rebound temperature during the day, you get in a lot better shape. So they don't bat an eye at that. Whereas if you're trying to grow your squash as long as possible, you know, once that frost comes, she gone, boy. You ain't getting no more. But this is a way too. I mean, if you're just trying to say, oh, I'm gonna grow a fall garden, and you live somewhere it gets a frost, and you keep growing tomatoes, and you keep growing squashes and corn or whatever, peppers, once that frost comes, your garden season's over. But once you plant that fall garden and you put those cool season crops, once that frost hits, it's just getting going, man. And that produce will get better and better, and you will be gardening at least a month longer than you normally would. Not to mention, a lot of these crops store really well. So, you know, you can get a cabbage, harvest it December 1, and it can still be in your fridge by February 1, possibly. You can have your rutabagas in there, love growing rutabagas, and they can last up until March. You know, you can have all of these crops or all this produce sitting in your garden bed and in your refrigerator, and it can last for a month or more. And you can keep having that produce, not to mention you can be preserving. And everybody out there that's like, well, I just want a break. You'll get your break, but you're gonna get a bigger reward by planting your fall garden and doing it on time. Goodbye.